Friends of Justice for God Productions. Today we've had some serious things happen in our history. For the first time in 600 years, a pope has resigned. The State of the Union will be a question of whether or not the State of the Union or the actual Union will be divided, because we have North and South, it seems to be along party lines, the Republicans and the Democrats. Everybody's holding their breath to see what's going to happen, what the president is going to say, and what will be the response of the Republican Party. We have radicals that are talking very serious weaponry, and the gun laws are being changed. All of this to try to find out a solution for today's problem. What will be the solution as North Korea tests a nuclear bomb and other things are happening in our society? Is the world about to come to an end because the Pope has decided to resign? Well, we won't know. We're going to look at some of those questions we have on our show today with real people, with real answers. None other than a person who has been here before many times, and you've heard him speak about the problems that the Vatican has faced. So welcome again to our show,
hello.
Belous.
How you doing?
And we're very glad that you're here.
Me too.
And we got a lot of interesting things that are happening. Is history unraveling in front of our eyes? Are we going to be a part of the end of the world?
You open the book of Revelation and pretty much start reading, and here it is. I mean, somebody knew 2,000 years ago of the things what's happening right now, and it's like,
What are the things that might prompt a pope to resign when they?
Well, the biggest things is, of course, we're causing him big headache. So if his health issue, yeah, we can agree, because I'm causing you a great stress because you are in charge of the terrorist organization who laundered Mafia money.
So that's what it is?
Yes, what it is. And after the last 3 years, we've been after you and telling you, you are in charge and you make people to pay you. And every single person who donate money to you, they are laundering terrorist money and helping. So there is nothing, nice to say about the structure of Catholic Church. The way it was established, the way it's perpetrated itself right now, and all these scandals unravel with all this financial fraud. Like, remember the saying, all roads lead to Rome. Well, all the bank fraud leads to Vatican.
Well, now you're being pretty hard on the Catholic Church. Let me ask you something. Does that mean all the Catholics are bad people?
No, absolutely not. The way I'm talking to, it's about the organization. Okay, the corporation soul, what they call it, is the
Okay, so you're saying
Catholic
that all
Church.
of these things are coming to light.
The people, they're naive, nice people who puts tradition in front of the facts.
Okay.
So the way of their living of their fathers, the way they want to do the same things, not understanding what their fathers was deceived by the so-called fathers, the popes and the bishops and everybody else, not disclosing certain information, misleading information, changing the God's law, and thinking it's going to be okay. Like it says in Revelation 17, it explains how God shows the actual punishment of that whore, which is the Vatican or the Catholic Church, who actually established all this greed, all this evil. It was partakers of our millennium for the last 2,000 years. It was in charge of pretty much of all bad things. So now, if we're seeing all these bad things happening to the Vatican, it's just what you sow, you shall reap.
Okay.
So it's a consequences. And now, if you read carefully in Revelation 17, the last verses after they established the New World Order since 2000. That's it. It's established. So we all know we live in a New World Order. So in the New World Order, it says there, all the kings, 10 kings, will have one mind, and the one mind only, to go and destroy the whore, make her naked, desolate, and burn her with fire. So the burning with fire didn't happen yet. So until the smoke comes out of there, I ain't going away. I'm not stopping talking about it, because it's what they deserve.
Okay.
It's too much lies in the religion. There is a godliness and there is a religion.
Okay, now let me ask you: will that really change society? This
think so
destruction
far.
of the Vatican, will that be the answer to our
No,
society?
it's too late. As you remember, I pointed out many different programs, and I was talking about specific date, December 21st, 2012, and everybody was thinking, oh, this is the end of the world. And I was constantly telling, no, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
It only identifies the moment when the sixth seal is open. Okay, when the seven angels comes up to the altar of God and receive their bolt of wrath. It takes time.
Right.
Okay? But the most important thing was everybody made their choice before that date.
Wow.
So I do not see not too many people who will come out and change their mind and really come to God. They're going to stick with their traditions. And your traditions will show you what your end is.
Okay.
There's really not much we can do. But to see if there's nothing would have been happening with the Vatican, you can call me crazy.
Okay. We won't do that yet.
But since there's things happening with Vatican continuously, totally in line with prophecies, sorry, I'm showing you God's plan. He's dealing with it. I'm just pointing out certain things in history.
Okay, let me throw another curveball at you. Someone has said there might be, this pope might be replaced with a pope from the Americas. Okay, this might be the first time the American pope has gotten to be in charge. Do you think that he might be the last pope before the end of the world? What do you think?
Take a look. I read quite a long time ago what the current pope was the 665th pope.
Right.
So this one is the new one comes up 66 pope.
Oh my goodness!
It's just too funny.
You're kidding me, for real?
Yes.
His number is what?
600. The one who resigns was 665.
Oh my!
I'm
goodness.
not confirmed that, but that's what I've read some stuff and I've seen it. So I should keep looking into it.
That would be pretty interesting if he actually came up with that name.
The 666 number is not the number which you're scared of. If you see 666, it doesn't mean, this is the beast. No. If you got a receipt for $6.66, doesn't mean you sold yourself to the devil. No.
Okay.
In Revelation 13:18, it talks about to whom who has wisdom, let him calculate the number of the man.
Right.
So it's a number which identifies the man in charge of the beast. Beast is the power,
right?
The government. So you're looking for a man who's in charge of the huge government, and their answer to identify that man will be 666. Well, if you will remember certain things, what happened to Jesus Christ when he was killed on the cross, the Pilate put a tablet above his head, and that tablet was written in 3 different languages: Aramaic, Hebrew, and Romans.
Right.
So those 3 languages, very interestingly, some of their letters means numbers.
Right. Okay.
So if you calculate some of those numbers, you can come up with some kind of answer.
Right. Okay.
So I'll point out a few things. Romieth, which means Roman-speaking man, comes to 666. The Latinos,
right,
comes to 666. Vicarius Filii Dei comes to 666. Over 300 different versions of the
number
of numbers still comes up and points out directly to the Vatican, to the Rome. I mean, even the phone number for the information for Vatican 060606. Are you for real?
No. People are gonna have a difficult time trying to believe this because for so many years the Pope has been considered not only a godly man but in the ranks of God, in many ways, even though it's obvious he's a man. Okay, now...
the Pope is not the only one Pope. We have white Pope and the black Pope.
Okay, now, can you touch on that a little bit? Because I'm not really clear on
the white Pope is the one which is most people knows about it. Just they call him Pope. That's all there is to it. And he's supposedly in charge of the Vatican and all the Catholic Church. And he's like a public speaking and everybody loves him. But what most people do not know, they have the certain position called the Superior General of Order of Jesuits.
Oh, is that right?
And that's who the black Pope, who is in charge of all the commerce, all the banking and everything else.
Oh, my goodness.
You really got to understand, the Vatican Bank is not... if you start looking for Vatican Bank as the Vatican Bank, you can't find it. Because it's hidden under another institute, and it's called Institute for Religious Work. So institute, which is control every single college, every education, every judge was got information from, everything was controlled through this Institute for Religious Work. The Vatican paid to break down the Communist Party. It's already shown they killed their own popes, like John Paul I, was killed in 33 days because he was about to expose the bank fraud, and the Masons all of a sudden didn't like it because, we're going to be exposed. And the History Channel did a program called Decoded, and it talks about Vatican, I think that's Scandal.
The
Vatican exposed, okay? And in that program, I mean, it's not me talking, it's the real scientist stuff. It shows there was a guy by the name Robert Calvi. He called himself God's banker.
Right.
Okay? And he's the one who was in charge of Vatican Bank for a long time with all his connections to Masonic temples and Mafia. So the History Channel, in one sentence, speak and say it. Vatican, Mafia, Masons. It's not me.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with me. But I know that true. But it's not me who's just saying. Okay. If you start researching how much secrecy does Vatican has?
Right.
Well, God has no secrets. He don't want anything to be in secret. He wants everybody to know about him, about his law. Everything. But why would religions be such a big secret? If you would have to go to some kind of college to read the Bible or to understand it, it's too much secrecy, which is made them divide themselves into different secret societies and promoting this secrecy, which is, you can see it with bankers, they don't want to show nothing. It's just the same principles goes to the courthouses. Everything. They want to know everything about you, but you can't find out about them because they're secret, occult, secret.
Wow. Well, you know what? That's a lot of things said, but what we're going to do, because we're going to have you come back on the show, because you're going to have to bring us some substantial evidence of all of these things.
I'll point it out them on the
we'll have it printed out. I guess I'm not going to take it too far. Basically, I'm looking at the judicial system right about now. Okay. How do you see the laws changing our society in the near future now with all of these things going on, the Pope, and we haven't heard from the President. What is your take on all the political?
Well, take a look. The banks were trying to settle with all the 50 attorney generals on the MERS scandal, on then the laundering of the terrorist money. Now they're trying to do it with the Libor scandal. So they have a lot of cash in their hands, and the reason they say it because we don't have certainty right now if we're going to have to pay fines or something. They're trying to say it like it's our fault, the ones who's exposing them. It's like our fault because we're exposing them. And there is such uncertainty. But it's okay for them to be and done all this fraud to the people for generations. And it's okay for them.
Just briefly so that we can update
so the courts...
Between the Libor and the MERS, what was the difference just for our audience?
There is a huge difference, okay? None of those scandals is actually going to help you too much in the courts, I don't think. But the one which will is the banks are responsible for laundering terrorist funds. And there is no judge in the world can compel you to pay to a drug cartel, which is the client of the bank.
How can you prove all of that, though?
That's already going to be, I have my documents, and that's like I said, I'm filing the affidavits very soon, and you're more than welcome to use them, but people need to start researching it and just put in their notes just one article, another article around the world. This scandal is international, so you have to get your information from BBC, from Russian news, from Italian news. Just don't concentrate on CNN only. There need to be, Reuters, Yahoo, all those. Just search them and constantly find out where they find some kind of fake bonds. Like we had in 2011, we found a lot of things. First of all, $6 trillion of fake U.S. bonds in possession of Italian mafia. Another thing I need to point it out, since January 1st, Vatican City, January 1st, 2013, Vatican City cannot use electronic funds like credit cards, debit cards or anything.
Okay, now why
because
is that?
the Central Bank of Italy shut it out because the Vatican Bank do not want to participate in the overall rules against money laundering. So they want to still continue saying, well, we're sovereign, we want to do whatever we want to do,
Right.
but it's already been proven. Well, they laundered way too much money.
Okay.
So they're saying you can't do it with the same way. You show us all your books and everything else. And of course, it's caused headache to a pope. So bye-bye.
Okay, that's right. Okay. Are we back on the Pope again? Okay.
I mean,
yeah, that's okay. That's all right.
But that's how it is. It takes time for these judges maybe to realize. But like I pointed out before, these judges are, some of them I hope they have good intentions to help people. But the problem is they are Masons. So many of them Masons, and if you take the Masonic, you swear to allegiance to protect your brother's Masons. That's why the Catholic Church have a problem with Masons, because they say you're supposed to obey God and all your allegiance, go to somebody else.
Right.
So that's why they kind of had the problem with Masons. But more I know, almost every Catholic priest is Mason. It's just a contradiction. It just makes no sense. I mean, it's
I'm
really.
going to look into that. Well, I've often thought that the problem with the judges are, I see a dividing line between the haves and the have-nots. This is where I believe that the world is going to, and the haves have everything. That's why we call them the haves. And the have-nots are struggling to get it, okay, and they're being barred from getting it. So as I see this line being drawn, and it's being drawn because they're looking at credit reports, they're looking at criminal background checks, and they're looking at the education is going to be an issue maybe down the road, but it's not right now. But those two things will prevent your credit and your criminal background will keep you from finding a place to live, getting a job, getting any of your benefits. It's like I'm almost afraid that's really what the 666 is all about, is a control between the haves and the have-nots.
Well, you got to remember, Revelation 13 again talks about the second beast who will have the power to control, who can buy and sell. Okay. And the things you just explained and testified to it. Yeah. You are living in a time when the government is trying to control who can buy and sell and what you can do. So it's a good thing what we know about these things. So
the bottom line.
The things ain't going to change much until Jesus Christ comes.
Okay, so what do we do? Do we grow our own food? And
we grow our own food. Go back to the basics. Yes, keep your own business. Go and
the answer.
do what you got to do to survive. Do not preoccupy yourself where you got to go make $1 trillion like they do.
Right.
Because it's not going to happen. It's not going to. You can't buy with $1 trillion the salvation from God. So you need to earn it. You need to humble yourself. It's process. Okay. And like I said, most people already made their choices. So right now it's like I'm speaking, but really I don't think there's going to be much effect where the people are going to be changed. They're going to be just mad. Oh, this Andrew man, he don't know what you're talking about. I know it.
So it's like he that have an ear, let him hear what the Spirit has to say.
Amen.
Because what's going on now is that most people are right now polishing brass on the Titanic. The Titanic is going to sink. It's going to be submerged in the icy cold waters of the North Atlantic. But inside the ship, before it sinks, is a nice warm cabin, and people are wrapped in their nice blankets in the bed, and they're cozy. And those that are in the kitchen are polishing brass as though the next day is coming. We're about to be hit with a tsunami. So our goal here on Friends of Justice is to let people know that God's justice is about to be put forth. And these are the signs of the times for people to get on board and begin to see how they can afford a change in their society. Not so much in their society, but to make a change in their lives so that they can be prepared. And so in order to be saved from the sinking Titanic, you have to get out of that cozy room and get into the lifeboat and be in that chilly water.
Before everybody else figured it out.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, we don't want to hold you too long tonight. just wanted to point out a few things. We're going to have some more comments about the Pope and the presidential speech and many more things about what's happening in our society. And most of all, we're going to take a close look at the justice just within our own neighborhood. And I have made a promise, I said, there's an issue right now in this city, Kalamazoo, and I'm not going to let it go until the Metro puts a coin machine in the main central station. Uh-huh. I will be announcing that every show until I see a coin machine, because it doesn't make any sense, and that's another form of injustice to the have-nots. And so when the show goes out, we want to make a note that I'm asking and I'm talking about, in the end, just with a little bit of justice right here and now, put a simple coin machine at the bus terminal, so we don't have to go to places like McDonald's and spend some money just to ride the bus, or go to Park Street grocery store. I love those places, but I don't want to pay $3 to add to my $1.50 just so I can get home. And then what happens if I can't get there and back because I have to run? I'm a pretty fast runner. I have to run to those stores and run back. By that time, the bus driver is pulling off and don't want to pick me up. And last but not least, Family Dollars, I think they want you to spend at least $2 to $3 before they will give you change. Please listen to me and change this type of life. Give us some kind of Band-Aid.
Yeah.
But you're going to be bothered by it, because I'm going to keep on talking about it. Even when I talk about different subjects on a worldwide schedule, on the worldwide area, I'm going to still bring it back home and say these little injustices have grown into other injustices. And I haven't even started to talk about the court system. There was a person, and I'm just summarizing this up, because when I start thinking about all the things that we have to deal with, and then we go to the court system, and they're supposed to be honorable, they're less than honorable. We're supposed to go to the church, and it's less than honorable.
Amen.
The question comes back, who can you trust? And this is all I'm saying. Since we've moved into this area of who can you trust, then we need to start leaning on God. And I'll end with this. He says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life."
Amen.
It's up to you to believe that God is the one you can trust, God is the one you can depend on, and he is the one who's going to save you and deliver you from this madness that we're living in. So don't go out and destroy yourself. Just look closer to God, because that's the only answer that I have. And I thank you. I'll
see you next week.
We're going to see him next week. Okay, we got to have some of that stuff to bring in there.
Oh yeah, anytime. There's also, just before we go, there's the news about the Russian army.
Yeah,
decided not to enforce the against drug cartels anymore, because they figured out they were one of the biggest drug cartels to begin with, so they didn't want to enforce it against themselves, so they decided to leave. So it's just the funny things what's really happening right now in the world, and they sit in 2011 and lie to each other as two kings. So it's your Daniel 40.
We got a lot to talk about.
It's just so many things going on.
We're going to have to start. Yep. We're going to bring some evidence. We're going to bring some evidence here. Because evidence. People will not believe it. That's why this, one of the models of this program is Believe It or Not. Ripley's Believe It or Not. Now it's going to be Charles's Believe It or Not. Okay. But anyway, it's out there whether you believe it or not. And so this time, for real, believe this. We'll see you next time.
Amen.
What if I told you that the Vatican, seat of the Catholic Church, covered up the murder of one of its popes? In September 1978, John Paul I was pope for only 33 days before he was found dead in his chambers by a nun bringing him morning coffee. Within hours, the pope's body was whisked away. With no autopsy and no investigation, he was virtually erased from history. But many believe John Paul I knew secrets about corrupt factions within the Vatican that may still exist today. Is the Vatican harboring secrets so dangerous that it was willing to kill one of its own popes to hide them? There's only one way to find out. It's time to decode the Vatican. I'm Brad Meltzer. I've spent my life collecting stories, signs, symbols, and codes hidden in plain sight. Some have become the basis for my novels, but I've only scratched the surface. And now history is giving me the resources to investigate the rest. This is Decoded.
Let's face it, there are certain people in the Catholic Church who rather delight in mystery. There is a cult of secrecy inside the Vatican. Don't forget the Pope has his own private diplomatic corps in countries all over the world who report to him personally. All these reports are filed away for posterity in the Vatican archive, which significantly is called the Secret Archive. The Vatican doesn't really like to divulge very much about its strategies, its tactics, its fears, its hopes.
So they answer to no one but themselves?
They are an independent entity. They're a sovereign state, and the Pope is the boss.
Vatican City was established in 1929 under Prime Minister Benito Mussolini, which is ironic because the fascist leader, while raised by a Catholic mother, denounced the church most of his life. But he knew that the church was powerful and that he needed the support of its followers. So Mussolini attempted to show support publicly, and that's why he gave the church absolute freedom. You see, the Vatican isn't just a city. It's not even a state. The Vatican is actually its own country. It's smaller than Disney World, but as its own sovereign state, the Vatican gets to make its own rules. Vatican City contains the Church of St. Peter, the Sistine Chapel, and it serves as the home of the Pope, the divinely chosen Archbishop who rules over 1 billion Catholics. Next in the hierarchy, beneath the Pope, is the College of Cardinals, a council of 178 who advise the Pope and on his death elect someone new to the papacy. Beneath them, you have archbishops, bishops, priests, and deacons spread out across the globe. But only about 800 members of the church live in the 0.2 square miles that make up the Vatican. And out of this small country and its ruler, the Pope, come laws and doctrines that shape behavior across the globe.
Do you think it's okay for the Vatican to keep these secrets from us?
Well, it depends what you mean by secrets. You know, there are a few skeletons in the Vatican's cupboard, namely that of John Paul I.
Pope John Paul I had a reputation as a kind and gentle man. He even tried to beg out of the papacy, claiming that he wasn't fit for the task. At the time, a scandal in the Vatican banking system was just beginning to take root, and it's possible that he felt he would be inheriting what he knew was a corrupt system.
His death was quite extraordinary because it was only 33 days after his election, and there's been speculation that if he had survived, he would have changed a lot of things in the Catholic Church. Of course, when you consider the number of secrets that the Vatican has been privy to in the course of its long history, we simply don't know that. If we had had a longer papacy under John Paul I, it would have been a gentle, kindly church. But there have been various attempts to suggest that there was a conspiracy to kill him.
John Paul I had a clear goal: to humanize the papacy and eliminate corruption within the Vatican. He made his plans to clean house very public, and it may have cost him his life. Perhaps the one person who really knows what happened is Sister Vincenza, the first person to find the Pope the morning of his death. So before we start jumping to conclusions of murder, we need to find out what she saw, where she went, and we need to hear her story.
So John Paul I was all ready to be a reform pope, and then he dies 33 days into his papacy.
Yeah, that's the idea, and that's where, of course, all the controversy comes from. We have the reformer pope who was planning on opening up an internal investigation in the late 1970s.
And that's how you get killed in Italy.
And that poses problems.
So it sounds like you're not surprised by the idea of John Paul I being murdered. How would that have happened? I mean, how could that have happened with so many people around him?
The standard hypothesis is that most likely perhaps either poison would have been used, if not maybe playing with the medication, because it's also a fact that John Paul I suffered from heart problems.
So someone could have messed with his medicine, just taken his medicine away or transplanted it to something else?
That's possible.
Well, that's perfect, because then he dies of natural causes that already existed.
Right. By canon law, by the law that governs this sovereign city, no autopsy can be performed on the pontiff. And one could look at it perhaps as laws then that are created precisely for convenience. They're sort of not even loopholes. Right. They foresee loopholes.
So they're set up. You're suggesting that they set up the law that you can't do an autopsy on a pope to protect anyone from controversy when a pope dies.
Yeah.
What happened to the first person that found him, and that was a sister?
Well, she was placed under obedience. This is another very convenient loophole in canon law. You can force someone to say or do or not say or do something because they have taken a vow.
So if the nun that found John Paul I saw something that would have been interesting in a murder investigation, and then she was forced under obedience to do or say something else.
Yeah, there's nothing surprising in that at all.
Because
that's her modus vivendi. That's her way of living.
Okay, this is the crooked lawyer's dream. Normally, if you want to silence a witness, either bribe them, threaten them, or eliminate them. But if the witness you want to silence happens to be a nun, all you got to do is call for the vow of silence.
It's one thing to obey a human being. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to obey God, who speaks through a human being.
And when God speaks through a human being, and he happens to be your boss at the Vatican, and he goes directly against the Ten Commandments, you still listen to the guy.
Out of respect for the deceased pontiff, etc., no comment would be made.
So this whole obedience thing, the being a law and a country unto itself, being able to keep confessions secret, they really have an incredible system.
Yes, probably the world's most developed, complex, and airtight system that could possibly function.
I mean, has anyone decided recently, it's time for this thing to stop being?
Again, going back to John Paul I, it would seem that he made an attempt, and unfortunately, he died a month later. Something strange happened. It doesn't really seem to make sense. We can let the observer draw his or her own conclusions. The facts are what they are. I think the case is not settled.
Who is going to settle it, though? If the Vatican's on their own, they don't have to settle it.
Rome is eternal.
You think eventually it'll all come out in the wash?
The sad thing, perhaps, is that if the truth is eventually revealed, and if it's disturbing, that probably won't happen until we're long gone.
So do you think the Vatican is corrupt?
Yeah, most definitely. But that shouldn't be surprising or shocking at all, because that has been all of its history. Corruption is something which has existed since the beginnings, since the Roman Empire itself, and it was maintained through the history of the Vatican, through the history of the Church. So whether or not someone took out John Paul I in 1978, it would be pretty much the status quo of the rest of history which has preceded us.
According to Eric, corruption isn't anything rare in the Vatican, it's the default setting. But as serious as these allegations are, it is too early to come to conclusions. We've got to hear all sides of the story.
The popes are not only buried underneath St. Peter's Basilica, there's more than one whose body's somewhere on the bed of the Tiber. So even if this were to have happened, if they weren't natural causes that provoked the demise of John Paul I, it wouldn't be the first time in history.
It's strange to me that you're not surprised by the fact that a pope may have been murdered.
No, unfortunately, I'm not surprised.
In a case like that in America, say, it seems like eventually witnesses would start to talk, someone would feel guilty, someone would brag about it, someone would confess. But you're saying...
We're in Rome.
In Rome?
We're not in America.
Talking things through can reveal the truth, whether you're talking history or your money. On History.
When people think of the Vatican, they think of the Sistine Chapel and St. Peter's Basilica, some of the most important places in all of Catholicism, and they should. But we've discovered that behind the history and the majesty may lie dark and sinister forces who may even be responsible for killing one of their own popes. So how could one of the world's most highly visible organizations keep such an explosive crime covered up? It is not as hard as you think.
Some of the people we've spoken with about the Vatican suggest that it's a very mysterious organization that keeps a lot of secrets.
They are not answerable to the world. The first thing they have to answer is to God. The world can judge them, the world can condemn them, but they have to still face a greater judgment, which is God. People want the truth, and people will eventually search the truth. And when they search the truth with purity of heart and purity of intention, they will find it.
Well, and you say that as we're standing next to a large wall keeping us in some ways from the truth, potentially, some would argue.
It's an ancient wall. It's a protection. The Vatican is a separate state, so it does have marked boundaries. They're just like any government that has some classified information. Governments do that all the time. People of authority in companies, heads of families do that.
This sounds a little bit like you're suggesting that this is a paternal situation, and the cardinals are our fathers, and
right.
They know what's best for us.
Yes.
It's not uncommon for the Vatican to withhold information, and perhaps the best example of this are the prophecies of Fatima. As the story goes, on May 13th, 1917, 3 illiterate Portuguese shepherd children were visited and given 3 prophecies by the Virgin Mary. She returned on the 13th of the month for 6 straight months, by which time word of the miracle had spread and a crowd of 70,000 gathered. Thousands in the crowd claimed to see the sun change colors, spin like a wheel, and dance across the sky.
Do you personally believe in the prophecies of Fatima?
Yes, I believe that Our Lady, the mother of Jesus, spoke to the 3 children in Fatima, a town in Portugal.
The miracle captivated Catholics around the entire world. The 2 youngest of the 3 children died of influenza within a few years of the event. But the eldest, Lucia, went on to become a nun, and she shared the prophecies with the Vatican. The first prophecy predicted World War I. The second prophecy predicted the return of Catholicism in Russia. Those were immediately released. But although Sister Lucia informed them that the Virgin Mary asked her that the third prophecy be released before 1960, the Vatican withheld it for 4 decades, until the year 2000.
I believe they have conveyed the prophecies correctly and honestly to the Church, and I do believe the Church has revealed everything to the public.
Case closed?
Yes.
The Vatican, they have had a few little spots of, bad press and some corruption.
The Church has always known it's made up of saints and sinners. They're human beings, they make mistakes, but they have the faith that the Holy Spirit is guiding them, and so it'll guide them to the truth, and they will also correct their errors. We have the words of Christ, who said that the gates of hell will not prevail against the Church. The Church will survive throughout history, throughout time.
Do you find it odd or curious that John Paul I died after only 33 days on the job?
Yes, I think anybody's surprised when they die a few days after they're elected to a high position. Mm-hmm. I think the world was surprised that he had died after just over a month, but I do not think that anybody would have killed the Pope or poisoned him. If there was such a thing, by now it would have been revealed and the people would have been punished. And if he really was murdered, somebody would have been taken to court, but nobody has been taken to court. Nobody has been tried. Nothing has been happened because it never took place.
So you were never concerned about any sort of internal scandal, assassination, or anything like that, murder?
No.
Okay.
It was a natural death. There was no murder. There was no crime.
From what we've learned, natural isn't the word we should use to describe Pope John Paul I's death. And perhaps just as important, want to know what the third prophecy of Fatima is, the one the Vatican withheld for almost 40 years? There are multiple theories, but one that many people subscribe to is that it predicted the murder of Pope John Paul I.
What can you tell us about the third prophecy of Fatima?
It's a dramatic prophecy. It has to do with a very dramatic war scene in which there's a city which has been bombed beyond recognition on a hill. There's a bishop in white who's going through the city, seeing cadavers all over the place. He's praying for them. He goes up the hill, and beneath a cross, he's assassinated, he's killed by arrows and by bullets.
We've heard of people are suggesting that the prophecy has in fact been tinkered with.
Well, people have scanned very closely what has been said in the past regarding the prophecies, and they've been writing down the dates of when a document was consigned, when it was carried to the Pope, when it was returned, when it was in a particular place. And when they put all these little pieces of information together, which aren't very many, but nonetheless it seems to come up with a question mark, and so they're wondering what has been kept back.
Why would the Vatican do that?
Well, there is a school of thought that looks at the missing third part of the prophecy as having to do with dissension within the church, and specifically within the hierarchy. Sort of there's corruption in the ranks of the church, that Freemasons are involved. And so their idea is they don't want to divulge it, and as it were, put the Virgin Mary on the stand against the hierarchy of the church.
This is an interesting problem for the Church. If a person steps up and accuses the Vatican of corruption, then it's one guy's word against the cardinals, bishops, and Pope. But if it's written in the Fatima prophecies, suddenly it's the Pope's word against the Virgin Mary's, and nobody wants that fight. Whether or not you believe that the Virgin Mary appeared to 3 shepherd children isn't the issue here. The minute the Vatican deems visions worthy of belief, it's the content of the prophecies that matters. The first prophecy was read by some as a foretelling of the First World War, and it appeared to be accurate. The second prophecy was interpreted to mean the return of Christianity to Russia, and that too came to pass. With that sort of batting average, it's no wonder there was so much anticipation surrounding the release of the third prophecy in the year 2000.
It was believed for a long time that the Fatima prophecy was written on one sheet of paper that consisted of about 25 lines of print. What was published in the year 2000 is one sheet of paper, but it's been folded over, so there's actually 4 sides of print, and you have about over 60 lines of script by Sister Lucia. Now, another thing that comes to light is that Lucia wants the secret to be revealed in 1960. She's very adamant. She says the Virgin Mary wants the secret revealed in 1960, and John the 23rd doesn't do it. He passes, and it's not really known why he passes. He never really articulates why.
Wow.
Sister Lucia, the nun who received the prophecies, wrote down the third prophecy in a 1-page letter to her bishop, which was seen by several witnesses. However, when the Vatican released the third prophecy, it was not in the form of a letter, and it was 4 pages, not 1. Skeptics claim the Vatican was presenting something of their own creation in place of the real prophecy.
People have speculated widely about it, and so we have different theories. What is the third prophecy about? So the first one really had to do with unbelief in the hierarchy of the church, that you have them using the considerable resources of the church for their own ends and not for the good of the people of God. Some people read the third prophecy as pertaining to John Paul I.
The text of the third prophecy, released in the year 2000, reads as follows. The Holy Father passed through a big city, half in ruins and half trembling with halting step. Afflicted with pain and sorrow, he prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on his way. Having reached the top of the mountain, on his knees at the foot of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. People read the city half in ruins as the Vatican divided. John Paul I ascended to the top of the mountain when he reached the highest office of Pope, and he was soon killed, leaving a trail of corpses in his wake.
The year before he became Pope, Pope John Paul I made a pilgrimage to Fatima, and he had an audience with Sister Lucia, which lasted for a couple of hours. Now, after that, he went on vacation eventually with his brother, with other people, and they say that he was very troubled. They don't know exactly what she said to him, but his brother Eduardo said that he was troubled by what Sister Lucia had said. Pope John Paul I was elected in 1978. He was Pope only for 33 days, and then in mysterious circumstances, his death came to pass.
Sister Lucia lived to be 98 years old, but we'll never know her full side of the story because, like the nun who found the dead Pope, the Church gave her a vow of silence. But the Church wasn't the first group who tried to repress Lucia's message. Way back in 1917, a member of another group found the 10-year-old girl and her prophecy politically dangerous and disruptive, even throwing her in jail to keep her from spreading the word. We are talking about the Freemasons. And yet it is always the Freemasons, right? But let's focus here. This is a subgroup within the Masons. The Freemasons, it turns out, still have a secret but powerful presence in the Vatican today. And some say this subgroup could even be the force behind the murder of Pope John Paul I.
We've been looking into the death of John Paul I, the Pope who served only 33 days. Can you tell us a little bit about the circumstances?
He was in his apartments just up there on the top floor, second window in. His assistant, Sister Vincenza, takes him his usual morning cup of coffee. Around about 4:30, 5 o'clock, leaves the coffee there. And she then says that she returned a quarter of an hour later to see that the coffee was untouched. She goes in and she notices the Pope, she says, propped up in bed, looking asleep, looking very serene, to use her words. And but she noticed that he wasn't moving, went there and took his pulse and discovered that he was in fact dead. And that's when the alarm was raised.
We'd heard that there was a history, that he had a history of heart disease, or that he was...
He was actually quite a fit man. He was very healthy. He was in the peak physical condition. Even his brother said the same thing shortly after his death, that they were in fact rather surprised that it was put down as a heart attack, because there was no history of heart attack in the family. At that time, there was a lot of investigation into the Vatican. There was rumours that senior members were Freemasons. And he was going to name and shame these people, and it would create a furore in the Vatican.
Everybody loves the Freemasons, right? The Freemasons are one of the world's oldest and largest fraternities, an ancient brotherhood steeped in secrecy. Formed during the Middle Ages, their distinguished members have included everyone from Winston Churchill to J. Edgar Hoover to Harry Houdini to 14 different U.S. presidents. But before you start thinking that the Freemasons are out to eat your babies, let's realize that not every Freemason is an evil mastermind. Yes, there are smaller, darker factions of the group, one reportedly responsible for usurping political powers and dabbling in the occult. Conspiracy theories abound, linking the Brotherhood's many rituals to dastardly murders and even satanic orgies. And a number of its members have mysteriously died after revealing their secrets. But I need to be clear here. It is reckless to take broad swipes at any organization, whether it's the Freemasons or the Catholic Church. But yes, if you have a small cabal with access to the most powerful people in the world, it is easy to see why the thought of Freemasons operating within the Vatican is a scary idea.
He was going to name Freemasons?
Several senior members were Masons. Obviously, that's against the Church's canon law. You can't be a Freemason and a member of the Vatican.
So that the Freemasons don't take over the Vatican?
The Vatican.
The Church has long been at odds with the Freemasons. Pope Leo XII declared Freemasonry the kingdom of Satan. You want to know why? The key requirement to be a Freemason is that you have to believe in God, any God. But it doesn't have to be a Christian God, and that's bad for church business. Also, as a Mason, you need to have loyalty to the Freemasons, but the Pope needs loyalty first and foremost to the Church. So where does your loyalty lie? As early as the 1700s, Pope Clement XII declared that any Catholic who joined the Freemasons would be sentenced to death. But apparently, even the death penalty wasn't a strong enough deterrent, because it was recently reported that the Freemasons have an expansive presence, splitting the Vatican into 8 different territories, each run by a different Masonic lodge. This means there are powerful Masonic leaders with agendas potentially separate from the Church, with the ability to influence major Vatican decisions. So suddenly, the Pope comes by and wants to get rid of all the Masons? You can see why someone would have wanted to take a shot at the Pope first.
I can imagine these people you've described wanting John Paul I dead, but would they murder a pope? I mean, wouldn't they be frightened of what would happen to them?
Because it's the Vatican, no external investigation was ever really carried out. You don't do an autopsy on a pope. You see?
You don't do an autopsy on a Pope ever? And anyone wanting to get rid of the Pope would know that they don't normally do an autopsy, so
Absolutely.
In a way they get away scot-free.
Yeah, and also the whole apartment was cleared up very quickly. Embalmers were called within 5 hours of his death. The domestic staff came in and wiped away every trace. I mean, I've spoken to people who've said it was as if John Paul I was erased very quickly from Vatican history.
You've got One of the most powerful men in the world has been found dead. No investigation. Within 5 hours, he's getting embalmed.
Certainly, a lot of questions still unanswered. But it's intriguing because within a few months of Pope John Paul I dying, prosecutors, investigating magistrates are also found murdered.
Wait, what? The people who were looking into this were murdered as well?
The prosecutors, the Italian prosecutors who were looking into it were also found murdered. An investigative journalist was also found murdered as well. It's all very, very murky. And the key issue is the death of Pope John Paul I.
It sounds like he's just the first domino to fall in a huge string of dominoes.
Yes.
So when you put all these things together, it does sound like a possible recipe for murder.
I think very definitely. I mean, say, it's a huge scandal. It would have been like an atomic bomb for the Vatican.
The Freemasons inside the Vatican definitely had the access and the resources to cover up the murder of a pope. But we still need to answer one vital question. What exactly was their motive? And to find motive, the first thing you have to do is follow the money.
On the next Big Shrimpin'.
Police flag, what are you doing?
We're investigating the mysterious death of Pope John Paul I, who died just 33 days after taking the post. In fact, many people believe that the Pope didn't die of natural causes, but may have been the victim of a murder perpetrated by the Vatican itself. But could the Vatican really be involved in something as nefarious as murder? We're learning murder may just be the tip of the iceberg.
We've been looking into the death of Pope John Paul I, and one of the things that keeps coming up is the Freemasons. Do you believe that anyone would have wanted the Pope dead?
Perhaps the motivation would be that John Paul I wanted to reform the Vatican Bank, change the way things are done, and fire some people. So there may have been animosity between Marcinkus, who was head of the Vatican Bank, and the Pope.
Paul Marcinkus was a rough-and-tumble American archbishop who was in charge of the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank was never meant to turn a profit. Any surplus was supposed to be used for religion or charity. But Marcinkus had some suspicious associations. For one, he was a known member of the Freemasons. And second, he's thought to have ties to the Mafia. And yes, I just said Vatican, Freemasons, and Mafia in one sentence.
One piece of news that I have found not very commonly known is that in 1972, Archbishop Paul Marcinkus made the Diocese of Venice sell their bank. And as you know, the Archbishop of Venice at the time was John Paul I.
Before John Paul I became Pope, he was in charge of the Venice Bank. Marcinkus forced the sale of the Venice Bank without consulting the Pope-to-be, turning a charitable organization into a for-profit business. That's not just a hostile takeover, that's original gangster.
The Pope was upset that Marcinkus sold his bank when the purpose of the bank in Venice was to help shall we say, underprivileged people, and all of a sudden it's going to be completely run over by the Vatican Bank. And Marcinkus had made some ill-advised transactions.
Money laundering.
I don't know that. He mentions that the Vatican Bank purchased a series of properties that went bust. Not to be naive, there have been accusations of laundering by the Vatican Bank up until very recently, in fact.
We now know that John Paul I had seen corruption in the Vatican Bank firsthand. So is it possible that the Pope's plan to clean up the streets and go after crooked bankers motivated Vatican assassins to end the papacy of John Paul I almost before it began? You can't write this stuff. Well, okay, you can, but we all know the scariest story of all is the true one.
That would be incredible to me if Pope John Paul I was actually murdered. I thought he had a heart attack, and I still would like to believe that.
Oh, I don't believe that anymore, though. I really don't. Does this not look like a haunted house to you now, rather than the Vatican?
Well, that's amazing. So the more information you have, the way it changes your perspective of a place.
I wouldn't want to be here after dark. That's all I'm saying.
It's okay.
Hey, Brad, how are you?
I'm good. How goes the search?
He had a lot of people that he was about to out and let everybody know that they were Freemasons involved in a bank scandal.
I'm sure money laundering and murder are not what the church had in mind when the Vatican was created. So let's follow the money and try to get more details on this bank scandal.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds great.
Hey, Brad, guess whose apartment light is on right now?
Yeah, there's an old expression, someone upstairs is watching you.
The Pope is up in his apartment.
The man who lives in that apartment is the leader of more than 1 billion people. They deserve that our investigation is as thorough and objective as possible.
Okay.
Pope John Paul I took the papacy in 1978 and basically said he was going to get tough on crime. He was found dead in his bed 33 days into his reign. Some believe that his intention was to publicly out Freemasons working within the Vatican hierarchy and take down crooked bankers who were believed to be connected to the Mafia. And maybe not so surprisingly, little was done to investigate his death. So now we need to figure out who exactly was behind this and what would they gain. Or was this all just a natural death?
At the time, the Vatican Bank was a sort of offshore bank based in Vatican. So you get a bank account and you can transfer money wherever you want without being known. So your identity remains secret. So it's ideal for money laundering. The Vatican Bank is obviously a bank, so its purpose is that of making profits. And Roberto Calvi helped the Vatican Bank at doing so.
Who exactly was Robert Calvi?
He was a very successful banker, an extremely successful banker. He came up as an ordinary man, but he rapidly ascended to the top of the management of his bank, and he got the nickname God's Banker.
Roberto Calvi was known as God's banker because of his close association with the Vatican. Calvi had tremendous influence and power within the financial world, but it appears that from his high position in the Vatican, Marcinkus, the guy who changed the Vatican Bank from a for-charity into a for-profit bank, could make Calvi do whatever he wanted.
And his bank was involved in financing opposition to communism, both in Latin America and in Eastern European countries.
Hold up. The Vatican is waging secret wars internationally?
Exactly. Consider that in the context of Cold War, untraceable funds became important, and such banks that could operate and could move capitals in a rapid way became extremely important. And one of this bank was the Vatican Bank. So this international system required more and more money.
So you're saying that Roberto Calvi helped the Vatican Bank launder money?
Exactly.
That's a pretty serious accusation.
This goes hand in hand with Paul Marcinkus saying you can't run the church by Hail Mary. You need money.
The way the Vatican Bank is set up, it's almost like it was made for money laundering. Because the Vatican is its own country, it operates like an offshore bank, with virtually no taxation, regulations, or oversight. Also, Marcinkus had been turning charitable banks, like John Paul I's Venice Bank, into for-profit banks, so he could easily move money back and forth between the two. It's believed that Roberto Calvi used these tools to engineer shady deals, bad loans, and illegal transactions for the Vatican, and it appeared to be working for a while, until Calvi ended up dead, murdered.
The center of the story is the relation between Calvi and Archbishop Paul Marcinkus. Since the Bank of Italy started to look into that, the star of Roberto Calvi began to decline.
So the Vatican used Calvi until he was caught, and at that point he was no longer useful to them.
Exactly.
Now you're getting the real story. Calvi was being used as a puppet to distribute Vatican funds to terrorist groups like the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, while keeping the transactions off the Vatican books. Finally, they created the ultimate Ponzi scheme. The Vatican Bank set up dummy companies in the Bahamas and Latin America. These companies applied for loans which collected funds from other international banks. The money, so it said, went straight to one place, the Vatican.
But would they resort to murder to keep it quiet?
They benefited from the death of Roberto Calvi, and they were not the only ones interested in killing Roberto Calvi. Calvi was basically killed because he knew too much about the connection between three different worlds: Freemasons, the Mafia, and the Vatican.
Now we're getting somewhere. Giovanni just saw our Freemasons and raised us a Mafia. They're all connected to a banking scandal, and the name above the bank's door, Vatican. Here's how it went down. When it became clear to Calvi that a giant hole in the books would be exposed, he needed money, fast, and lots of it. So what does he do? It's now commonly held that he brokered a deal with the Mafia to launder heroin money through the Vatican Bank. So how did Calvi and Marcinkus wind up working together and in the middle of one of the nastiest banking scandals in modern history? Well, one connection is that they were both members of the same Masonic lodge.
I think that somebody from one of these three worlds, or the three worlds together, were afraid that Calvi could blackmail some political institutional figure or somebody from the Vatican or the Mafia, explaining how the whole system worked.
Giovanni, of those three organizations, though, which of them had the most to gain from murdering Robert Calvi?
Probably the Vatican.
Wow.
As Michael says in The Godfather, Fredo, don't ever take sides with anyone against the family, ever. So which side did Roberto Calvi take? The mob, the church, or the Freemasons? Calvi was indicted, but before he could be brought to justice, he actually fled the country. His secretary wrote a note condemning him, and then she threw herself out of a window. Calvi was later found hanging from a bridge in London. His pockets were loaded with bricks and $15,000 worth of cash in 3 different currencies. The death itself was dripping with Freemason imagery. It was reported that the Masonic Lodge at the center of this scandal, they called themselves the Frati Neri, or the Black Friars. And where did they find Calvi's body? Hanging from Blackfriars Bridge. Now, does that mean the Masons did this? Not necessarily.
How do you think it happened? How did they do it?
Probably the Vatican or the Masonic Lodge used the Mafia or somebody from the underworld to execute Roberto Calvi.
Oh, so the Vatican may have been involved, but they would make it look like the Freemasons did it or the Mafia did it.
Exactly.
So how does this connect to the death of John Paul I?
John Paul I wanted to reform the Vatican, probably attributing a different role both to the Vatican Bank and its chairman, Paul Marcinkus. This case also revealed that the enemies of the church might be within the church itself, as the Vatican prophecy stated.
This story just keeps getting better. Who would have predicted that the Vatican would end up laundering heroin money for the Mafia to cover up a Freemason banking scandal that ends with the murder of a pope? Our Lady of Fatima, the Virgin Mary, that's who. This would explain why the third prophecy was withheld for over 40 years. It predicted the fall of the Vatican by forces from within, and why John Paul I was so troubled after his meeting with Sister Lucia. He saw himself at the center of it, and he saw the bullseye that was on his own back.
If it's Monday, it's Pawn Stars with business.
Started with the possible murder of a pope, and in the course of the investigation, we've covered the Freemasons, the Mafia, and a secret holy prophecy. But here's the question: did the Vatican murder their own pope to cover up dark forces from within its own walls? Buddy McKinley and Scott have their own conclusions.
Hell of a journey.
Yeah, does the Vatican look different to you guys now?
Yes, it does.
It actually does, yeah.
So let's just weigh in.
This place has secrets, it has skeletons, and in order to have skeletons, you got to have dead bodies.
So do you believe that there are powerful people in the Vatican who had something to do with John Paul I's death?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. I do think that there's ample evidence. I mean, he's about to make some major reforms that are not making some people happy. Motive all over the place. no autopsies done, shoddy investigation.
Yeah, there's a phrase from the underground, it ain't on the square, you know?
Yeah.
And something in those 33 days seemed really, really suspicious to me. I would hate to believe that the Vatican was involved, and I know that, on the other hand, they've been involved in things in previous papal eras that were, you know, confirmed to be really, really dark. And when you start looking at things like the Masons, who often get mixed up in discussions about these scandals, and the Mafia, then it's possible they were involved in this bank scandal. The scandal, you know, included financing foreign wars and maybe the cover-up of a murder. And you know, to me, there's a precedent for it.
Absolutely.
If they were involved in this Roberto Calvi problem, then it doesn't surprise me.
For me, just the discussions around it got really uncomfortable. When I was asking Eric Walters, and he was like, well, it's been done before, that's just how it's done in Rome. There was this sort of relaxed idea like, yeah, popes get murdered all the time. I mean, that alone is a little disturbing to me. Do you believe that they kept and are still keeping some of the Fatima prophecies a secret?
I don't think there's any question at all that the Vatican's keeping secrets. I mean, everything and everyone we talk to points in that direction.
I'm with Scott. I worry that prophecies are often apocryphal or conveniently written after the fact.
Right.
In this case, there are some of that. You know, it looks like it may have been inconvenient for the church in that they may, in fact, have manipulated it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the thing that really worries me. We've got an entity that answers to no one but the big fella upstairs, and it is a massive money-making machine. And you think they don't want to protect that at all costs? Any organization that is this revered, that is in charge of so many people, it has to keep secrets.
But let's not forget, the Vatican is made up of men of the cloth. That means they are human beings.
Right.
Human beings make mistakes. Human beings sin. And the key is whether they can get back up and ask for forgiveness and move on. So as long as it is run by people, there are going to be things like that are going to happen.
It's a true reflection of humanity.
It's a very, very good point.
I think what's interesting about this journey we've been on is that there's this incredible confluence of dark forces, you know, murder, intrigue, and it all comes to a confluence right here at the Vatican.
You know, I totally agree with that. I never would have guessed when we started on this particular journey that we would be talking about the Mafia, the Freemasons, and the Vatican in the same breath. And let's not forget, it did lead to a murder.
You know, like you said at the beginning, I'm never really going to look at this place in exactly the same way. So, on to the next one. Unbelievable.
It is unquestionable that the Vatican has done incredibly positive things for people all over the world, and they continue to do so every day. And of course, the Vatican's billion followers deserve transparency. But when you have an institution perfectly set up to keep secrets, you're testing the individual men and women within that organization. You see, governments don't lie. The Vatican doesn't lie. People lie. And it doesn't matter if you're a man of God or a man of science, because at the end of the day, we are all just men, all human. We're flawed and we screw things up, and we get greedy and we can be corrupt, but we also can be brave and inspiring, achieving what no one has ever dreamed of. It is no small task to reform one of the oldest and most powerful institutions in the world. But I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Pope John Paul I had lived and carried out some of the reforms he foresaw. How much more powerful would the Vatican be if they operated with transparency and let their followers see what was really going on inside? And that's perhaps the Vatican's best kept secret.